Ready? Everybody good? Well, good morning, everybody. It's good to see everybody here. This is our, Carlos, I believe this will be our last budget meeting if everything goes right. Is that right?
Hopefully.
Hopefully. Good. Look at Jim. I guess it will be our last. So it's good to see everybody this morning, and thank you for those of you who participated or joined us in the 4th of July festivities. And Carl, thank you to you and your group for spearheading that. It was a terrific day. It always is. And so thank you very much. Council, are we ready to start?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Bia, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Good morning, everybody. So we're going to be, as the mayor mentioned, hopefully holding our last workshop today, although we have an optional one scheduled should the council feel we need it. Today, I'm calling it the Omnibus workshop because I've always wanted to use that term. And it's going to cover everything. Primarily, what we're going to be doing is talking about the final property appraiser valuation, talking in detail about the proposed rates for the enterprise funds. We'll be summarizing the other funds, but no changes really have happened in the other funds. We'll also be answering earlier council questions, and we'll be highlighting some changes. And in changes here, what we found is when we were going through the early workshops, and we recall those were preliminary, we had all the numbers put in the budget, so Jim and his team did a great job, but there was a couple of items that didn't make it into my slides, but they were actually already in the numbers, so I'm going to be talking about those today. So let's start with the questions. So I'm going to be going down this, no specific order here necessarily. We tried to capture everything in this slide and the next one as well. So question actually from Councilmember Kravitz about the Lightfoot generator, and it actually dates to 2012. Was also asked about the potential value. Depending on whether it's scrapped or auctioned off, we're estimating somewhere between $500 to $5,000 for that generator. In the Street Improvement Fund, question was asked by the mayor about the life cycle of the street sweeper. With regular maintenance, it's estimated to last 6 to 8 years. I wanted to also just remind the council, as I mentioned, that our plan is to go out and issue the bid for this to see if the bids come in and it makes sense from a cost-benefit analysis. And one of the costs we're going to be contemplating is not just the cost of the street sweeper, but it would be the cost to staff it. We'd have to hire somebody in the FY27 budget. And we mentioned that last time, but we have a number now associated with that, which is an estimated $60,000 in wages and benefits. Again, that would be in FY27, should the council wish us to pursue this direction. In sanitation, we are, if the council approves, we are purchasing 2 rear-end loader trucks, sanitation trucks, and the anticipated scrap and auction value of the 2 existing trucks is probably $15,000 to $20,000 we estimate total. In the building fund, Councilmember Fernandez asked about what other communities, if they are supporting their building fund through the general fund. We managed to make contact with the city of Tampa and Hillsborough County, and in those instances, they are not supporting it through the general fund. Caveat there, of course, you realize those are the scale of Tampa and Hillsborough County is much, much larger than ours, and with all the development and land area that they have, it doesn't surprise me that there's no support from the general fund. And we're going to be talking about a possible remedy to help sort of lessen that support from coming from the general fund. Question has also been asked about our street resurfacing methodology. Councilmember Kravitz has asked, and Councilmember Fernandez has also followed up with me on this. So 5 years ago, there was a plan that was approved by the council. It was based on you'll hear pavement condition index, PCI index. So that's basically different communities do it different ways. Historically, you might even have interns that go around and they just look at the condition of pavement and they assess it. Today, there's a much more modern technique, which is actually illustrated here by the picture. This is a contracted van with sensitive equipment on the back. And in fact, we're going to be using that starting in August. You'll see the community will see this van driving around. And they were going to be testing the pavement and measuring the pavement through all the city streets. They will then come up with we're asking them to do a 3-year plan, basically help us put together a 3-year plan based on that index. So the index goes from 0 to 100. So 100 would be the equivalent of a brand new street. 0 would be a place where the pavement is completely at failure rate. So that's how we did the plan 5 years ago. there are exceptions to the plan. So, for example, it was mentioned at the meeting, Brentwood and Sunnyside, those streets are not as bad condition as other streets in the city, for example. But what happens is in Brentwood and Sunnyside, it's also coinciding with other projects. So Brentwood, there's a stormwater project that we're going to be doing that the council you approved the design for in the 25 budget. Hopefully you'll approve the construction in 26. So we're coinciding the pavement of that street with that project to make the most efficient use of resources. Sunnyside, largely the same. There's some trenching patches that were done several years ago with some infrastructure work on Sunnyside. Next year, you've got traffic calming projected improvements to be built on Sunnyside, so that's why that street has been moved up in terms of paving. So when that happens, other streets kind of get bounced back and they go to the bottom of the list, or they go to the next order on the list. So that's how the plan is managed. As I was mentioning, we're going to be doing the new measurements of the payment conditions starting in August. We'll get that data back to our staff probably in October, and then if everything goes well, probably first part of 2026, possibly January, we'll be before the council with a list of streets for the next 3-year plan. Now, let's talk about the general fund and the property valuation. When we did the first round of workshops, we were anticipating, based on the property appraiser's initial numbers, a 3.4% growth in our taxable value based on the 95% collection rate. That number, fortunately for us, went up, so it's 4.3%. That leads to a taxable value at 95% of $3,218,733,959, which would generate $19,748,581 in ad valorem revenue, which would be a difference of $186,703 from the original estimate in June. So if we tie that to our proposed budget, we have a total general fund budget of $40,810,147. In that number, there is a contribution to the unassigned fund balance of $59,716. Again, we are not proposing any new FTEs in the general fund, and there is no increase in millage proposed. The current millage rate would stay the same, 6.455, and that would be the 9th year that the city has not increased its millage. Now, as I mentioned at the outset of the presentation, there were several items that were contemplated from a financial perspective, but didn't make the original slides. So I wanted to make sure the council was aware of these. Using unassigned fund balance, we have several items in IT. We have 2 Vibe smart boards that we're looking to acquire for the conference rooms. These are interactive boards that can be used for video conferencing, but also basically serve as whiteboards. You can do trainings with them, things like that. We are also looking to refresh our hardware, our IT hardware. The last time we did a major refresh was using COVID dollars back in 2020, 21, in that time frame. So we're coming up on 5 years now. So we have 42 Dell PCs scheduled at $65,000, 60 Dell laptops, $111,000, 7 Dell XPS laptops at $26,000, and then replacing the 5 council iPads at $2,100. Again, funded through unassigned fund balance. In public safety, a couple items again that didn't make the original slides. The police department is looking to refresh its rifle inventory. Ultimately, we're going to be acquiring, if the council approves, 14 rifles over 3 years. The rifles that we have now date back to the 1990s, from what I understand. This first phase would be 5 6-hour rifles at $23,217. The fire department also is looking to acquire protective ballistic gear. This is what's pictured here, basically. It's basically a bulletproof vest that will be on each of the apparatus. Should the firefighters have to respond to a call where there's an active threat, and as we saw what happened just last week actually across the country, this is something that has more salience today than probably ever. And that would be $31,000, and again, both these items would be acquired through unassigned fund balance. Also in leisure services, looking to acquire 20 garbage cans for parks and athletic fields using unassigned fund balance, and that would be $18,000. Any questions on the general fund before we move on?
Councilmember Fernandez.
So just to clarify, these items that are in the slides right now that you're highlighting were already actually factored into the numbers that we saw at the original workshop.
They were.
Okay. And then I do want to just make the comment that for those who might be watching who have concerns about street repaving, we did talk about the process and how we're going to get the streets repaved, but if they have specific questions about specific streets, what should they just call your office or email?
Sure. I think if they have concerns about specific streets, what they should do is send a note to Mr. Warrenfeldt
Okay.
in Public Works, and he'll make sure that it gets, when I say gets addressed, at least make sure that their concerns are reflected. So when we have the contractor coming out and doing the PCI testing, we can make sure that we correlate whatever they find with those concerns.
Okay, and then I just have one more comment. That's about the millage rate, that we are clear that we are not increasing the actual millage rate itself. However, people are going to see an increase in their property tax based on the fact that the value of their property has increased from last year. Even if you're homesteaded, it's going to increase a small amount. So just so that if somebody's watching and they get their tax bill and they say, they didn't increase my millage rate, but my taxes went up, that people understand that that's the difference.
Yes, that could be it. Also, I'm not sure what the county and the other taxing authorities are going to be doing with their rates, and they could be increasing their rates.
Right.
Which would then do the same.
But, correct, they could still have a higher overall rate because of the other jurisdictions might be increasing their rate, but our rate is staying the same. However, the property valuations might increase for individual owners. That's all. That's it.
Mr. Chambers?
Yeah.
Vice Mayor?
Yes, how many, a couple questions. How many vests is that going to be, the ballistic vests? Just
One for each apparatus. Chief, do you mind taking?
Just one?
One on each apparatus, so it depends on how many apparatus, if you count your command vehicles as well in that number.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of council. There's enough gear, there's a helmet and vest for every person on the truck. So a rescue has 2 sets of ballistic
Okay.
gear. An engine has 4, the ladder has 4.
Okay,
The
so it'll be enough for
has 1.
everybody. All right, cool.
Yeah, they're not assigned to each individual person, it's just part of that truck, the gear for the truck.
How much weight does that add to the bunker gear as it is?
Typically, we wouldn't have it on with our bunker gear.
No?
If
Okay.
it's for like an active shooter or some kind of assailant situation, then we wouldn't have our bunker gear on. It is heavy, but it would not be worn with, or an air pack or anything like that.
Okay. All right, thank you. Of
course.
The last question I had is on the streets. It's always been an issue. How does this tie into the striping as well?
Sure.
Or are you going to cover that later? If you're going to cover that later, that's fine.
I can address the striping. So typically, what we would do is we would try to stripe streets that are in decent condition, for example. So if we know a street still has several more years of life ahead of it, then it would make sense to stripe it and refresh it. Now, if a street's on its last legs from a pavement condition, we'd probably think twice before we stripe that street if it's going to be, addressed in the next year's budget, for example, in terms of the paving cycle. But if you'd allow me, I have the city engineer sitting in the room. Maybe I could bring him up and have him, if I sit something out of school.
Because that's as big an issue as the actual
Yep.
paving of the street is whether it's,
Yep.
whether they can actually see where they're supposed to be.
Yep. No, he's saying I got it correct. So that's typically what we do.
Well, are we
Now,
going to do this, internally, or are we going to still farm it out to?
We would, well, I think we farm it out, correct? Yeah, we farm it out because some of the equipment for the long lines striping is not stuff that we would have on-house.
So how much do we have planned for striping?
We're gonna
He's going to come up anyway, sooner or later.
Good morning, Mayor, City Council, Brian McCarthy, City Engineer. In terms of how much, in terms of dollar values,
Yeah,
or
well, $8 value.
I believe this year there's somewhere between 25 and 30,000 is what's budgeted.
And how many linear feet will that cover us?
It depends. Again, with like a double yellow line versus a yellow skip, it's just going to vary.
Well, I mean, we have, 15,000 intersections. How many of these are we, what's our plan on the striping? The plan for the surfacing is one, but the plan for striping, that is a different evaluation, a different schedule, I'm sure.
Yes, that's correct.
And how are we addressing that?
Right now, we're more reactive than we are proactive with the striping, and so we do have quantities already in place. We're reaching out to contractors right now, which is unfortunately out of the 4 that we've reached out to, none of them are interested in doing the work, so we're continuing to reach out to other contractors.
Because I think going forward, that's going to be an important source of information to the public. Like, okay, we have this list of intersections or streets or whatever that our plan is to attempt to address in the next fiscal year. That might be something that would be interesting for at least they'll know whether their area, their hotspot is listed on that. That's all I'm saying. Okay, thank you. Thank you, sir.
Councilmember Kravitz.
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick question about the generator at Lightfoot. Given the scrap value being a maximum of around 5,000, was there an examination made about whether leaving it in place as a backup might make sense? I know it's been unreliable, but even an unreliable backup can be handy.
This is a big generator, in a whole building generator, so I wouldn't think so. Mr. Warrenfeld, you want to come up and?
I see the head shaking. That's fine. All right, just checking to see if it was looked at. That's fine. Personally, no council iPad for me. And I also wanted to ask trash cans. Great that we're adding them. Have there been any motions made in the direction of potentially adding some downtown?
Good morning, Mayor, City Council members, Carl Langfeld, Leisure Services Director. The trash cans that we have ordered and are in the budget at this point are replacements and additions for our current inventory. We have not budgeted for the addition of trash cans in the downtown area. That's certainly something that we can explore.
So if we don't explore that today, is there any facility for doing that?
I guess it would depend on where in the downtown we're talking, how many trash cans. If you have specific locations, I mean, I'm just trying to get a grasp of the breadth of the request.
I have ideas. I don't have any specific locations in mind. I know that we own some property downtown still. I don't know if that's the place to put trash cans. What we discussed previously in emails was potentially a program where we maybe incentivize the developers who are in downtown to accept a public trash can and maybe help administer it, so empty it. You know, we provide sort of a little bit of the infrastructure and then they do a little bit more of the grunt work, maybe for a cash incentive. That's a small one. And that would probably bring the trash cans closer to where the people are actually moving around and throwing their trash away. That was kind of the thought that I had. I know that trash downtown is a big sore point for a lot of people. And I just saw the line item for trash cans, fantastic. A lot of people like that idea. But moving them into the downtown area where the trash is most obnoxious might be smart. And that's why I'm asking about whether today is the only opportunity to address that. Are there other funds that we could maybe tap into in a program of that nature?
Well, I mean, we may include that in the, actually it might probably be included in the sanitation fund. That's where I would imagine we would put that, because it would have to be our sanitation. I understand what you're requesting about the merchants doing it. My experience with merchants, not necessarily here, so take that as for what it is, but my past experience with merchants is that they will never do that. They never have their staffs take care of it. And sometimes when it's overflowing, and they say they were going to take care of it, they don't. So it's really inconsistent. So the public has an expectation that the trash will be picked up. So ultimately, cities ends up doing it. So I think we'd probably want to go into it with the notion that, okay, this, whatever the number of trash cans and where we locate them, that it would be probably either our streets units or our sanitation folks just picking them up along their route.
Yeah.
So I mean, if that's what the council wants us to do, that's what we'll do.
I mean, I'd be interested in doing a bit of a pilot program there, maybe just with a few trash cans to try and pick up a little bit of the extra trash that's being discarded downtown and not being addressed by the trash cans that the merchants currently have out there. Is anyone else interested in that? Downtown is like I said, a bit of a sore point for most people. They go down there, they don't like the aesthetics, they don't like the trash being out in the parking lots. So, I mean, I think if the merchants aren't going to do it, as the city manager says, I think we can try incentivizing them. We could try using some sort of a legal structure to fine them if they don't follow through on their obligations, if we give them these trash cans. As an alternative to that, if we're not gonna put any obligations on the merchants, then I can see a scenario where we just take responsibility for cleaning up downtown, because I think it's too critical to fail, so.
Well, my only comment about this at this moment is that it's private property. And I do have concerns about the city taking over an aspect of maintaining private property, as in this particular private property. Well, what about other private property shopping centers? Why aren't you doing this here? Why, so I have a concern about that. And I would like to, I agree, the aesthetics is very important. And I would like to try to work through the code enforcement system and the other systems that we have in place for trying to encourage private property to maintain their property before we went to something like this, because I don't want to do unequal treatment or unequal behavior on somebody's private property. That's my concern.
I agree with some of that, except that in addition to that, I would want to see what the cost of it would be for streets or sanitation to have to step in. That's going to be either personnel and or equipment or time, and in the long haul, there will be additional costs associated with that. Again, I don't like interfering with the private property, but the public areas that we have down there, how bad is it in that area? Is it really, is it going to require it? But I'd like to see the dollars before we commit to anything involved with that.
Right, man.
Sure.
So I just want to understand, in my mind, I was understanding something else. I just want to be clear. So, Councilmember Kravitz, are you talking about like Bertha Palmer Boulevard, basically trash cans along the boulevard in the right-of-way, in the public's right-of-way? Or are you talking about some sort of trash cans on the private properties themselves?
I'd like to see both if possible. I think it's a bit of a problem down there. So I fully acknowledge the point about private property. You don't want to interfere in that. When it comes to code enforcement, we've had that infrastructure for as long as downtown has existed. So from my perspective, it's had years to try and succeed in addressing the trash issue, and it hasn't really succeeded to our expectations, or at least to the expectations of the public. And so what I'd like to see in downtown is some sort of a different approach, whether it's even more code enforcement, in which case I'm happy to talk about what that might look like, or alternatively we go the route that I was just discussing, where we take a little bit more responsibility for cleaning downtown up and making sure that it is aesthetically what we expect of it. And even though we're putting in our own money and our own effort, maybe our own staff time, we will be rewarded for that, because if the downtown flourishes, it'll lead to more tax revenue for us, and it's a benefit to everyone. So I fully acknowledge, I don't want to incentivize merchants who are behaving poorly. I don't know what their legal obligations are in terms of trash cans. I know some merchants put trash cans outside in front of their businesses. I'm not sure if they're doing that because they're required to, or whether they're doing it because they're nice. Sometimes they're full, other times they're not. I know that there's a lot of trash laying about in general there because people don't have enough trash cans and they're not always available to use. So this is the strategic topic that I'm trying to address with this, and since the topic of trash cans came up just now in the budget, it seemed apropos. So that's all I'm going for here. So if anyone has any ideas about maybe enhancing code enforcement down there, I'm happy to go that route. If anyone wants to put aside a budget for a pilot project, maybe with a few public trash cans down there that we take care of. I mean, a lot of cities in the world do that. Whatever it is, I'm happy to do it, but I don't think that the status quo downtown is serving anyone well.
So, some questions I would have. Is this an issue only with the southeast corner quadrant, or is this an issue on all four quadrants of downtown? Is it okay on the west side of 56th Street, but not on the east? Those are the things I would like to know. Is there problems on overflowing trash cans on the other side? I know we have issues sometimes around the bus stops and stuff, so it is an issue down there. But I can't agree to do anything other than maybe us get a report way later on.
Yeah, I mean, I think, to the Vice Mayor's point, looking at the cost is a good idea. I think getting a report, seeing where the need is greatest is also a good idea, because otherwise it's just sort of my anecdotal information, so I don't know if that's the best
And
reliable source.
Councilmember, I agree with Councilmember Fernandez on the private property issue. That's opening up a lot of different scenarios.
Yeah, well, in that case, we could maybe look into the covenants that we have governing downtown and see whether there's any obligation there for maintenance that people aren't meeting, and then it would become a legal issue. So, I'd always rather work with incentives rather than trying to enforce against merchants who are maybe not doing what they're supposed to do, because it's usually less efficient to go that second route, but, I can understand the arguments, yeah. I'm happy to support whatever. So can we decide then that we would like to see what a plan might look like to enhance trash pickup downtown, maybe either through more code enforcement or through some sort of a mechanism for deploying trash cans? Is that something that we can all get on board with?
Well, yes and no, for me. We have, all the stuff's already exists. This isn't, we have codes that require private property owners to maintain their property to a certain condition. If they're not doing it, we should be citing them. That doesn't require a new study. That just requires a citation, right? We have, this structure already exists. If there's trash in the public property areas along Bertha Palmer, or other property that we own, and we need to put trash receptacles out there, then yes, put trash receptacles out there and pick them up. I mean, if that's where the trash, I don't know if that's where the trash is or not, maybe it is. But I'm adamantly against, and I don't need a study, and I don't need to put you guys to work and to tell us about putting trash cans on private property. I don't think that's a good idea for a number of reasons. We don't do that to other people, and so we're rewarding private property owners for not maintaining their property because we just relieve them of the problem and do it for them at taxpayer expense. And we don't do that for Carrabba's, and we don't do that for anybody else. We're just going to do it there. I don't need a study to tell me that I won't support that. But I mean, if we have trash along Bertha Palmer or on other properties that we own, then I don't think we need council action for you guys to put trash cans out there and pick it up. So I think you can clearly hear that this is on the council's mind, is the condition of litter on public property. I don't know that we need to take formal action to get you to.
So if I could, so I agree. We can, if it's on the public property, we can obviously locate the hotspots where there might be more trash accumulating and try and strategically locate trash cans there. And we can work that into either our sanitation or our streets program. Yes, I'm getting the nod from Mr. Warrenfuss that we can do that. The private property, as the mayor was alluding to, that's the reason I was asking the clarification, because I didn't understand it as private property initially. I would not recommend the private property because, again, sanitation fund it's a business. So if you're going to now do it for free for them, where's the incentive for them to continue to pay for us for the services and the use of the dumpsters and multiple pickups and things like that? But we can address the other issue relatively quickly.
All right, great.
I have a.
Oh, go ahead, please.
Councilmember Kravitz.
No, you have the floor.
Well, are we done with this issue? Because I was going to move to the next one.
Oh, I did have one more comment then on it. Thank you. About the nature of downtown, I think it's sort of a mixed space. We have a large public space down there that we're planning on developing into a mixed-use community / public use area for people who want to come down there and do pedestrian events and so on. So I think there are some. Sorry? The large empty space right now, we just gave a contract to the broker with a modified instruction that we're supposed to entertain offers that don't maximize the cash value of the property, but rather include a community aspect. That was my recollection of what we instructed the broker to do.
Okay, all right.
That's what I'm referring
That's a little
to.
different than what I just heard, but that's okay, go ahead.
So
Okay.
if we're going to pursue that angle, what that means is that we're going to have externalities downtown that these merchants aren't fully responsible for. And so I think that there's an argument to be made that we could include more public involvement in the structuring of downtown and also in the infrastructure aspects, keeping them clean and making sure that the trash doesn't get uncontrolled there. So I agree there's a public property private property clash there a little bit, or there will be increasingly if all goes well. And so that's why I'm interested in this. But I think it's fantastic. Let's start with trash cans in the public areas. That's wonderful. I'll take whatever I can get on that point, and that I think addresses some of the other concerns. So I'm really happy to hear that. And now I'm done. Thank you.
I have questions about some of the things that are being funded through unassigned fund balance, and I'm not opposed to the purchases. I'm just would like a little, if you can walk us through the reason we're funding that through unassigned fund balance. I'm assuming it's to kind of lower the general fund, but the items that I'm talking about are like computers, the rifles, the trash cans. I'm not opposed to these purchases, but I know that all of these items are typically on like a replacement schedule, just like our vehicles and trash cans and police cars and everything else. And so my question is, why are we opting to fund these through unassigned fund balance as opposed to the traditional line items within those respective budgets?
So I think the answer is twofold. One, you hit on initially, which is we're obviously sensitive to the millage rate. Second is these are not annually recurring costs. You're correct that there's a refresh schedule. For example, the IT items, every 5 years, we look to change out the hardware. So right now we're doing it unassigned fund balance, again, because next year we don't plan to do it. So in 5 years from now, if the council approves it this time around, then we'd have to revisit and figure out, do we do it through unassigned at that point or do some other mechanism, perhaps through the general fund, through the line items in the general fund. The other items, the public safety items, for example, the rifles, as I mentioned, they hadn't been changed out since the 90s. We're now on a program. Again, it's a program. In 3 years, if the council approves this phased program, in 3 fiscal years, we would be done, and we'd probably be set for another 2 to 3 decades, so we wouldn't have to come back to that item. So again, thought process was not to burden the millage rate with that, and we had the flexibility to use unassigned. That's why we chose to do it that way. The trash cans, again, we looked at it as, again, we don't buy trash cans on a regular basis. This would be a pretty large allotment of those receptacles. We'd buy them now, probably wouldn't buy another set for years to come. So we felt that it would make sense to do it using unassigned fund balance.
Okay, thank you. Chief Murley, would you mind coming up? I have a couple of questions about your vests. So I'm not opposed to these purchases either. I'm just trying to understand a little better. What is the protocol? Because typically, if there's an active shooter in a situation, traditionally, fire usually would retreat until that threat is kind of neutralized if they can. But so I'm curious about the protocols when you would intentionally stay in the danger zone. And I'm also curious about how these protective vests would work if you had to be in the danger zone because you're fighting a fire that's immediately dangerous to life and health. And so would you be able to don the ballistic vest with the bunker gear? So I'm just trying to figure out the practicality part of this.
So we've had the ballistic gear on the trucks for some time.
You have?
Yes. The ones that we have now are dated manufactured June of 2018. The lifespan is about 5 years.
Okay, so this is a replacement, not a new program.
Correct.
Okay, well then forget all my questions then. Okay.
I thought it's new.
Okay, I thought we were embarking on a new program.
No, we're looking to replace gear that we have now that's
Okay,
updated.
all right, I won't bother your time then. Thank you.
Oh, sure.
Thank you, Mr. Villa.
We okay to proceed?
Yep.
Okay, so next up, we're going to be talking about sanitation. We are not proposing any changes from the first round of the workshops. The recommended rate increase, as we mentioned last time, it was 5%, and we're maintaining that. I'm going to draw your attention now to the pro forma. This is the 5-year pro forma. So a few things here. This has several assumptions. If you look at the footnotes on the slide, you'll see that and this is going to be the same for the water and sewer fund as well, these assumptions. So we're assuming the personnel expenses, if you take all the wages across contracts, general employees, as well as all the benefits, we're anticipating about 8% per year increase in personnel expense. Operating expense, we programmed out 5% per year increase. The growth rate is 2% in the current fiscal year that we're looking at, fiscal 26, and then 1% subsequently thereafter. So we've always tried to be conservative in that element. So if you look at The ratio, the bottom row, which is the reserve ratio, as the council knows, when we talked about it here many times before, we always like to be at 25%, which is basically 3 months of reserves if you need it. Obviously, we're not hitting 25% here in sanitation, and that's because partly because again we're not proposing it. We want to keep the rate manageable. We feel like 5% is a manageable number. It's what we've talked about in the past. Secondly, unlike the water and sewer fund, in this case, the reserve to us it's important, but it's not quite as critical. And the reason I say that is in sanitation, typically, okay, if a truck breaks down, we know how much a new truck costs. In water and sewer, on the other hand, if we have a pipe that bursts underground, think about Fowler Avenue, that cost could be monumental because there could be conflicts underground, there could be other things you discover, there could be now you've created cavities. So that reserve in water and sewer is very, very important. And we'd want to make sure that reserve is always kept at least at that 25% goal. So in sanitation here, we're a little bit more comfortable. We also know that this fund, of all our funds, this one operates most like a business. So every time the sanitation manager, Mr. Munoz, adds new commercial accounts, that's new revenue coming in, so that it helps it grow and expand the business. So for those reasons, we're comfortable with this. Again, just to remind the council, the FY26 sanitation budget includes the 2 vehicles, as well as adding a driver and 2 maintenance attendants. It also reflects absorbing the 18% increase from the county for disposal. We have, believe that contract expires in 2028. We should seriously look at an alternative and before we get to 2028. At this point, I would not suggest renewing a contract with the county, just based on the experience we've had. With the FY26 number they gave us, that 18%, it's going to be a 111% increase over the last 5 years. And that is incredibly hard to swallow. And not only that, from an efficiency perspective, and I have lots of respect for the county personnel. I know they're trying to do their best, but their operation does not prioritize our sanitation vehicles. And so what that means is that the county vehicles, they get a transponder that allows them to cut the line, if you will, go right to the front of the line. We've asked for that. We were told we could get that, and then at the last minute, they took it away from us. So there are times we'll sit there, and it may be an hour, 2 hours, and we're just sitting waiting to get through that. And then in the meantime, we're going to be incurring overtime costs because we're not able to finish our routes. So for efficiency and for the costs, just putting it out there that, again, before we get to 2028, we're going to need to have a conversation about what we're going to do. And maybe it's just go on the free market, and maybe that's the best avenue for us. But that's down the road. Again, just wanted to note here, primarily, again, that we are at a 5% recommendation for sanitation. We feel that that'll address our needs moving forward. Any questions?
Vice Mayor.
Okay. With regards to the options for 2028, can you give me a 30-second summary of what those options might be?
Sure. Well, if we want to go into a contract, I mean, we could look at potentially the city of Tampa. We've used the city of Tampa facility.
As opposed to the county?
As opposed to the county.
Okay, all right, okay.
There might be, and this is just me speaking, not necessarily based on any research I've done with the team, but we could also consider perhaps being on the market. Because when we went to the city of Tampa, we didn't have a contract with them. We just went because their rates were cheaper and they could get us through the process, and they gave us the transponders, and so that we got primary attention when we got through there. So it was in and out. Again, without benefit of contract. So there's different things we're going to be looking at. Again, that's a couple of years down the road, but I just want to sort of lay the groundwork here for that conversation.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Kravitz?
I do. So I just want to confirm the tipping fee or the disposal fee, that the increase of the 18%, that is a known entity at this time.
It is.
Okay. And the next increase from that, from Hillsborough County, would come in time to prepare next year's budget, fiscal year 2027.
That's our expectation.
Okay. I mean, theoretically, I guess they could increase it, but we've already been told we're not basing our budget on an estimated disposal fee.
No, the number they gave us several weeks ago is going to be for FY26. It was going to be 18%. If you allow me, has that changed or is that still the same? Oh, the number changed. Yeah, after they told us. Okay.
Yeah, that's my concern,
Yeah.
because the increases have been so large, and we're establishing our budget and our fees right now, and I'm just concerned that if we are faced with, we have established that we're accommodating an 18% increase, but if it actually goes up to 25%, what does that do to our service? And then, my other question for you is, yes, we can bring in new revenue with new commercial accounts, but what's the offset between our increase, so adding an account, and then what the required additional either manpower or infrastructure in trucks? If we bring in a bunch of new accounts, do we then have to just offset it by new employees so it basically washes out?
So good question. But what I think the most illustrating point for that would be, we are in the 26 budget. We're looking again to buy vehicles and to add staff and do all that and only do a 5% rate increase. If we didn't have the new accounts, we wouldn't be able to do those things. I mean, if we didn't have the growth and the sales and that they've done and grown the sanitation fund. So we're always going to have to do more. It's a business, right? So you grow, you're going to have some expenses but in this case, the only reason we've been allowed to grow is because of that, because of the revenue that's coming in, the new revenue that's adding to the fund. So that's been helpful. Otherwise, we wouldn't be proposing this to you. In fact, we'd probably say, well, let's try and Band-Aid these trucks together, keep it going. We wouldn't have the staff. So that would be the concern. So I think the fund, in that perspective, is doing a lot better, because it allows us the flexibility to really address some of those critical issues. If you recall, last year, there were a number of times when we had the residential routes that were delayed, and I was sending notes to the council because the trucks broke down. There was one day, if I'm not mistaken, I think we had 3, if not 4 trucks all broke down at the same time. So we're trying to get rid of those 20-year-old vehicles and modernize the fleet, so we're able to do that and still keep the rates. If you look out in this pro forma right now, you look at year one is 5%. We're still projecting 5% going forward. Now, of course, this is out years, so take it with a grain of salt. But it's usually a pretty solid understanding of where we plan to go. So, again, that would not be possible without the work of adding and selling new accounts and things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. B, I have a question. Actually, it's a request for some information, which I really hate to do to you because I know you guys are rather busy. But I know this is, the results of this have helped in the past to show that we're still in a favorable and competitive market. And so I'd like to see if we could get and share it with all of us, the residential costs, not commercial, because there's 1,000 variables that go into commercial rates. It's almost impossible to do that. But residential costs, what they'll be with our 5% increase compared to unincorporated in Tampa and maybe Plant City. And also, I'd like something on there, a reminder of this is a real big caveat here, is we visit your home 4 times a week in Temple Terrace, whereas, for instance, in Tampa, you have the same size trash barrel, but I think they come once a week in Tampa, so if I'm not mistaken. But we come for trash twice a week, yard waste once a week, and recycling once a week. So we're at your home 4 days a week. So if we could get like a one-pager, this is in Tampa, you pay X, and you get 1 visit, 1 recycling, and whatever you get. And then Hillsborough County, this is what you get. I think that would go a long way toward, we've had to raise these rates for the past few years, and we've proactively kind of explained to the public what the drivers of this increase were. And as a result, the public we haven't gotten a lot of backlash from that, because I think we've done a good job of explaining what the costs are. This is a great analysis. I think all of us are always hesitant about raising fees or taxes on anything, but we have to do it. It is worth the public remembering that we gave you a 95-gallon trash barrel, which for most households is sufficient for once a week pickup. But the public here doesn't want that. When we talked about that, they were, no, we want the twice a week. And so that's why we continue to do that, but there's a cost to that too. So if we could get something like that as like an FAQ kind of thing, just a comparison, not just within Hillsborough County.
Yep. So I was actually trying to get that in time for today, but the other entities, they're not there yet. So we're a little bit ahead in terms of our budget process because of some of the council member vacations. We kind of expedited this a little bit. So I was planning to have that in time for the hearings. It was actually going to be one of the slides for the budget hearings in September. I can provide it ahead of time to the council as soon as I can get it from the other entities.
Good, thank you.
Oh, Jim has a comment here too.
Mr. Ingram.
Thank you. We do this.
Microphone.
Mike?
I'm sorry. Yep. We do this every year, so we will be prepared. Of course, we will separately, apart from the budget, we will need to have the council adopt a resolution in September for the increase of utility rates. Currently, this year, I know that we are, for residential sanitation rates, we are lower than Tampa, City of Tampa, and the county. Plant City, I believe, is a little lower than us. So, like Mr. Bahia said, we don't know what they're going to propose. I believe they may already have a structure in place where they're going to raise it so much every year. We'll take a look at that, though, and provide that for you. I do know that 5% of our current residential rate would be an additional $1.77 to the sanitation monthly charges.
Thank you. Yeah, usually this comparison shows us in a pretty favorable light, which is a good reason to do it, so. Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right, moving on. Water and sewer funds now. So just like we did a short while ago, there were a couple items again that were factored in financially, but again, did not make the slide decks. So from water and sewer, the first item here is, as I think the members of council have been around for a little bit, they know that our staff, there are staff that work in water and sewer, staff that work in sanitation, staff that work in the general fund, and some staff that traverse multiple funds. So when that happens, when there's staff that works in multiple funds, we allocate their time to different budgets. And we have to take a look at that every year because depending on practice and what's going on in the department, sometimes that staff person that was supposed to be half-time in water and sewer and half-time in general fund ends up being entirely in water sewer in terms of what they do on a daily basis. And that's what we found here. We have a couple of employees that part of their time was still in general fund, but they've evolved now into primarily just working in the water and sewer fund. So we have moved $70,710 in basically wage benefit costs for that change from the general fund into the water and sewer fund. The second item is an EasyLink meter reading box, which is actually pictured here. So this allows our meter techs to read our meters remotely. We have one already. This would be the second one. So when they go through the field, they can pick up all their information this way. And then the last item is, in the first presentation, we had talked about SCADA, which is the remote operating system for our lift stations. And I'd mentioned we had $100,000. This is a multi-year phased approach for updating those systems. And that was for $100,000 was $20,000 for each of our 5 lift stations. One thing that was left out was because I saw the $100,000 number, I'll admit it, and I thought, oh, this must be just a mistake, right? We have it twice, but no, it had to be twice because there's also $100,000 for the Whiteway treatment plant for their SCADA upgrade as well. So that's why this is here. Now moving on to the pro forma for the water and sewer fund. So this one, it has a little bit more detail. So the footnotes would all be the same. So as I mentioned last time, personnel expense is 8% per year in terms of assumptions, operating expense 5% per year, growth rate 2% in the first year, and then 1% each subsequent year. Now, one thing that's also on this pro forma is noted at the top that there's a minimum of $4 million in capital programmed here every year. And then at the top left, you'll see that it also contemplates $500,000 in water and sewer fund capital moving to the CIT, which is what we talked about at the last time. And the mayor had asked for some examples of incremental changes to that, which we're going to show you in just a sec. But I do want to make mention of a couple of things here as well. The reserve ratio, which I talked about in sanitation, here, as I mentioned, it's critical, in water and sewer particularly. So thanks to the great work that Jim's done, we're able to hit that reserve ratio 4 out of the 5 years. In the last out year right now, it would drop a little bit, so that rate would probably need to be adjusted. If you look at the revenue where the rate line is, you'll see it's 5%, except for next year. Right now, it's projected to be 6% based on what's in capital. But let me talk about the capital side. The capital plan that's in here is based on a capital plan that we've been working with for several years. As council knows, we have a water facility master plan study that's going on right now. When that study comes out, we assume that there will be a list of capital projects that will probably be tens of millions of dollars of improvements over the next several years that we'll have to contemplate. So that will change this capital program. Secondly, as we've talked about, depending on the EPA regulations regarding PFAS in water systems, if those regulations stay as they've been presented today, they are being challenged in court. But if they stay as being presented today, we will have to acquire some sort of treatment system. Based on just preliminary research right now, those treatment systems for a facility our size with a $5 million gallon output, those will not be cheap. So again, that will also impact some of these out years in this 5-year pro forma. So that's just a means of me telling you that this 5-year pro forma right now is a vision in time. Next year when we come to you, I think it'll be much more reflective of some of the more pressing needs that have been identified in the last 365 days, basically. So that will change that. And so some of these revenue projections may also change because of that. We may have to increase the rate at a different pace than what we contemplate today. So the FY26 year will really be a year for us to get our bearings and understand, where we need to go over the next 5 years. Any questions on this portion?
Capital are we taking out of this budget and putting and charging to CIT in 26? How much money?
Sure, $500,000 based on this pro forma. And if you allow me, I can go to the next slide, which I think gets at where you're going, Mr. Mayor. So the mayor had asked the last time to present you with some incremental scenarios here. So what we've got here, and again, I want to recognize Jim for the work he did putting this together, is if we kept the capital program in 26 the way it is, we didn't make any changes there, and we did not propose taking $500,000 of capital and moving it to the CIT, then the rate we would need to have, the rate increase would be 8% in order to get that 25% reserve ratio, right? If we want to keep that 25%, we need an 8% rate increase. And what you see in that chart, if you go down just progressively, you'll see, if you moved $100,000 worth of capital to CIT, 200, 300, et cetera, progressively, you'd see that the rate diminishes. And then the column on the right, the third column, is what it would do to the CIT. So the CIT reserve, that's the amount of money that's left over after all the FY26 CIT projects are accounted for. Those dollars would be noted there on the third column. So based on this, we looked at it and we felt comfortable, and Jim did check with the county again to just make sure that what we were doing, what we were suggesting to be done here was acceptable. They indicated that it was similar to the practices that they have there at the county. So because of that, we suggested in FY26 doing a 5% increase and not necessarily an 8% increase. Now, if council wants us to do something differently, obviously we can. One thing I'd like to note as well is that when we first presented the projects for the CIT from water and sewer, there were 2 projects, if you remember. It was a Queensway gravity main repair and then a SCADA upgrade for the lift stations. They $400,000 for the Queensway project and $100,000 for the SCADA. When Jim was going through this, he suggested, and I totally agreed, from an accounting perspective, to track these things later, it would just make more sense to have one project that's $500,000 than rather than try and track two projects and assign them to the CIT. So what we're suggesting, if council wants to go with this plan, is if we're going to move $500,000, that we just move the Montrose Avenue gravity main replacement project, and that will be the project that will go to CIT.
So I have a quick question before, thank you for this analysis. This is exactly what I was hoping to see, so thank you for that. So what, if any, projects will be lost from, is there anything that we would have normally done out of CIT that we're not going to be doing because of this? In other words,
It's replacing.
we use CIT for police cars and fire trucks and park equipment, playground equipment, things at the rec center, those types of things. Did we cancel any proposals that we would have normally done in order to displace this $500,000 to this?
No, and Mr. Ingram and I talked about that after the last workshop, and we are funding every request that came to us from the departments this year for items that would be, for example, under CIT. We're funding all the requests. There's some items that you see in unassigned fund balance, you might ask, well, could those go to CIT? And actually, Jim corrected me since the last workshop. He said, no, because there's certain things. CIT, in our minds, is really more about infrastructure. And then if you start getting into, and sometimes there's a gray area between what's infrastructure and what's equipment, but Jim's trying to make sure that equipment side doesn't go to CIT, but infrastructure does. So you'll see that mostly with the CIT. And in the questionable ones where we feel like really that's more like a operating equipment thing, we've put in unassigned fund balance. So that's how we've approached that situation.
Okay. I just wouldn't want a situation where, okay, we saved you 2% on your water bill, but now we're not buying police cars on schedule, so we're not in that position.
No, I think, and they're here, the two chiefs, so they can attest to it and come up if you want, but
No,
we're
that's
funding
fine.
everything they've asked for.
Okay. Good. So, Councilmember Kravitz? Anything?
Just a small comment, which seems like we're taking a relatively flexible fund, which is CIT, and then we're using it to subsidize a fund that isn't flexible. I don't really care where the money goes and which pot it is. Just for the record, I don't have a problem with this plan. But the CIT money could be used for a variety of things, whereas a sanitation fund can only really be used for sanitation projects. So if we do this, we should be aware that we're not losing flexibility right now, but we might lose flexibility down the line.
Vice Mayor?
Your comment that you just made regarding the usage of the CIT fund, that if I was listening to if I'm understanding your definition, then you're saying we couldn't, and I know we can't use the CIT fund for buying police cars. Can you clarify what your comment was on that? And I know we can use it for that, okay?
Yeah, within the definition of the CIT, public safety expenses are a little broader in that vehicles are definitely allowed for fire, police.
Right.
We wouldn't use it to buy for instance, a community development vehicle. They are specifically in the CIT plan code that the county put out almost 30 years ago now. They specifically mention public safety vehicles, equipment associated with public safety.
That you answered my question, because you said your comment was infrastructure, and I know we've done the other, and I just wanted it on the record that there is a crossover. It's not the right word, but we can use it and have used it for that in the past. It's not strictly infrastructure, but there is opportunity. There's times where we use it for equipment. I just want to make sure everybody here is on the same page with that. That's all.
Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, in my mind, I was thinking about leisure services.
Agreed.
That's the one that gets a
Yep,
little gray.
yep. I just, this is recorded, so just wanted to make sure that made it into the record too.
Councilmember Chambers?
Yes, no questions, but a couple of comments to the colleagues here. So we've got, do we keep the monthly rates down, moving this 500,000 project to CIT, or do we operate that fund like the business and don't do that and raise the from 5% to 8% to the monthly bills. If we do that, though, we're going to have some bigger increases down the road when we have to address some of the regulatory issues that we've got coming up. So I don't have a solution to it. Those are the, two somewhat choices I see. I'm not opposed to the $500,000 move right now to keep the monthly rates a little low because they're going to go up in the years future. So
Councilmember?
I have a couple questions here. So, to begin with, the CIT balance that you showed, the $1.8 million, is that the ending balance of all of our anticipated CIT collections through this next cycle because the CIT will sunset at a certain time? So is that?
Just got renewed.
Right, it did just get renewed, but it will sunset into the future. So what I'm asking is this 1.8 million balance, the ending balance at the end of fiscal year 2026, or is this the ending balance of our anticipated collection of CIT?
You want to take that one?
It's through the end of fiscal year '26, which
Okay.
includes the revenues and the expenditures
Of 2026,
of 2026 and the ongoing ones
okay.
we currently are doing.
But through the rest of the time period that this community investment tax is in effect, there will be more revenue coming in. That's not the ending balance. That's what I wanted to clarify.
Correct. So as, I think I may have even mentioned it last time, based on projections from the county when they were renewing the CIT, putting it back on the ballot, the city of Temple Terrace was scheduled to receive $53 million over 15 years. So again, that's numbers they provided to us. So yes, this will continue to grow at this point.
Okay, so, and then do the CIT funds have an expiration? And this, I know the answer, but I just want to make sure that people know that, is there, like, the ARPA funds had a expiration, do the CIT funds have an expiration that we have to spend them by a particular time?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. And then, question for you. Right now, the city of Tampa treats all of our wastewater. And we know we've explored other options, and we know that this is the direction we need to go. However, they have increased their cost that they charge the city pretty substantially in past years. Do we know what our actual bill will be for 2026, or are we basing this on an estimated cost?
So the actual bill is based on meterage, so the sewage is metered, it goes out, so that aggregate number will change, but the rate, they've told us their increase. Jim, you want to fill in?
Yeah, it's 3%. They've actually got, I think it's a 10-year out schedule where they have that fixed. Every year, we will get a 3% increase on our wastewater bill that the city pays to Tampa.
Okay, all right, so we do have knowledge of what our rate will be, and of course, I know it's an estimate because we don't know exactly how many gallons will go through it this time, but I was talking more about the rate. Okay, so my biggest concern is the age of our infrastructure, and I know that we're doing a study to establish where the infrastructure is on its lifespan, and obviously not taking into account the emergencies that may come up. But when we've established these rates and this budget, do we have any inkling of the cost that might? I just want to make sure that we're establishing rates and a budget based on a reality of what we really might need to spend to bring our infrastructure current versus coming back in and saying, oh, well, it turns out all our pipes are 70 years old and they're collapsing and we're going to need a massive overhaul and your rates are going to be 32% increase. So that's my concern.
It's a fair concern. I think this year, as I mentioned, is going to be very telling for us because not only will we get the water facility study, and we're also going through some of those EPA regulations, but we have new management in utilities, so people are looking at it with a fresh set of eyes. We're also going to be doing a little bit more of the proactive, sort of trying to find where some of these hotspots are and trying to address things in a more proactive fashion. So right now, all I can say is that the number is going to be tens of millions of dollars in terms of capital, and how we phase that over several years, that's information I don't have in my disposal just yet. Now, there may also be grants and things like that could defray some of those costs. But again, I don't have that. I will have that by next year's budget, is what we anticipate based upon the timing of these studies. And at this point, I think I know what you're trying to get at, council members. Is there a way to prepare for that even starting this year?
Correct.
A gradual progression of the rate.
Right, so, should we basically set a 7% rate in anticipation of knowing that we're probably going to be putting out $10 million over multiple years to improve this versus all at once?
Sure. And I mean, obviously, that's the council's discretion. If you want to basically increase a reserve bank of funds to start to address these major capital items that are coming down the road, if you would like to start that in this year's budget, obviously you could do that. I just wouldn't be able to provide you with all the costs
Correct.
that buttress that rate increase.
Those are my questions.
Okay.
I have a quick follow-up, just real quick. I know.
All right, we've been down the dais once, so, okay, go ahead.
I know, I'm sorry, I just thought of this. Are we auditing the inflow, what we're actually processing through the city of Tampa versus what we're actually pumping? So we're eliminating the I&I and issues that we've had in the past?
Mr. Warrenfeld, can you come up and try and address that?
Mayor, council members, Jason Warfield. The auditing process would be the meter calibrations, and as we recently discovered, some of those it's not been done as annually as we had liked it to been. So as far as flows, I am working with Hillsborough County on some flow items as far as how much we receive and how much we pass on, and then what we bill them for.
But it is on a horizon.
It is. It absolutely is.
All right, cool. Okay, because I know it's been a problem in the past. Let's just make sure that new eyes have seen, looking at that issue also.
For sure. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of discovery that's happening. It's not bad. It's good. It just brings us up to where we need to be and places that we need to go. So.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Councilmember Kravitz.
Not addressing it. Might be also worth thinking about financing these costs coming down the line over 30 years, maybe with a bond, because asking the current ratepayers to pay for infrastructure that'll outlast them probably is not necessarily fair. So I don't know if it's possible, but what we could do is issue a bond and then perhaps use revenue from the sanitation fees to pay for the bond?
So, water and sewer fees, right?
Yes.
So I think that's what you're going to have to do. The magnitude of these costs are going to be such that I can't imagine we would ever have the cash on hand to make that happen. Your rate increase would be too dramatic. But just keep in mind, even if you do bond it, I mean, if you're talking tens of millions of dollars and you do a bond at today's rates, that's still going to be a pretty big draw on the fund on an annual basis for debt service.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is the council okay with the recommendation then? Just before we move on? Or?
Yes.
I think so.
Okay. All right, on the street improvement fund, this is just meant to just refresh everybody's memories here. The total capital outlay in street improvement is $5,250,000. There were no changes made since the initial presentation. The fund balance at the end of '26, after all that expense, will be just under $1 million. Mobility fee fund, this is the fund that used to be in street improvement. All these projects were in street improvement. We've pulled them out because they're funded not from gas tax, they're funded from impact fees. So they have to be used for adding capacity, addressing growth. So in the FY26 budget, what we presented to you last time, there's two projects, the Ferncliff Avenue sidewalk construction and an additional $50,000 for new segments of sidewalk that we may want to build. We identify certain areas for a total capital outlay of $175,000. That leaves a mobility fee fund balance at the end of fiscal '26 of $3.5 million. That's a big number. So what I am proposing is that if the council agrees, we're going to talk to our public works team over the next several months and try and find areas where we can build, for example, a new sidewalk, and bring you a more robust capital program in the future for this. This is an area we've been doing repairs, but I feel like we really need to look at this a little bit better and think about, okay, where do we want to be in terms of this network and what can we build? Because again, these dollars are very restrictive, so you can only use it for building new sections, large sections of sidewalk basically, or roads if you wanted to do that. So next year's program will probably, in my mind, hopefully be better and more robust for you to consider.
So,
Yep.
just to confirm, we can build new sidewalks out of this money, but we can't repair existing sidewalks out of this.
That is correct. We have dollars in the street improvement fund, if you recall, that we put in there to do those repairs. These would be, for example, if like in telecom, there's a section of sidewalk that's been talked about for us to build. We would use these dollars for that, for example.
I do have a question.
Councilmember Fernandez.
When you're building the sidewalks or repairing them, we have a lot of trees. And one of the issues that we find is they may look very easily navigated initially, but the tree roots tend to move the sidewalks around. In either case, building new or fixing established, are there other products or other techniques that might be better for certain areas of sidewalk that help reduce the problems that we do have where, and I mean, if you walk anywhere in the city, you see parts of the sidewalk are elevated and moved. And then we obviously have to go back and repair them, but is there any kind of other product that we could put down when we're building new or when we're repairing them that might help in that situation?
So, two parts to the answer to that question. I think the first thing is, as council probably will remember, we're putting in this budget a sidewalk grinder, to help us proactively address when there's heaves in the panels, to grind out the edges so that we don't have those trip hazards.
Yes.
The issue, and I'll ask Mr. McCarthy to come up with the material, is the ADA compliance. You're supposed to maintain a certain grade with the ADA in terms of walkability. Even with the other materials, if the roots are under the sidewalk, I don't know if you'd be able to still do that because there's still going to be some trip hazards or heaves that are going to happen. They might not be heaves in terms of the concrete panels, but it could be still heaving in a sense that creates the same trip hazard that we still have to address. But maybe, Brian, if you know there's other products out there, you can talk to those.
You pretty much summarized it very well. Right now, we are looking at a new product related to stormwater, more like a plastic rubberized that allows the percolation. I know that was one of your priorities regarding the materials rather than doing everything out of concrete. But when it comes to ADA materials, we're pretty much restricted to concrete, asphalt, or like a boardwalk, just because of the way the tree roots will even lift up some of that rubber material.
Okay, thank you.
Member Chambers?
Yeah.
Vice Mayor? Member Kravitz? So I just have a comment, this has been consistent comment I make every year budget. I am an advocate of us improving our sidewalk maintenance program, which we did a few years ago, and I think there's a lot more work to be done on that. I know we can't use the mobility fee money to do that, but some of it's been a funding thing and some of it's just been a programming thing. I know we're looking, we're trying to bundle 15 repairs together so that we get economy of scale, but we have a number of really poor condition sidewalks in throughout the city and that have been that way for a long time. And the sidewalk grinder, I'm happy to hear because that will help. But I would like, I bring this up at goal setting too. I'd just like to see us get a little more robust on our sidewalk maintenance and repair. We have, it's the nature of the kind of city we have, which is a really, I guess, other cities would be envious of this problem. We have a lot of sidewalks and a lot of beautiful trees, but they don't go well together. And, you know, it's a good problem to have from a certain perspective, but it's also a maintenance nightmare. And so I still think that needs to be elevated in priority, in my opinion, but.
I know, as someone who walks around the city a lot, I agree.
Yeah, we've had people injured because they're tripping over them and stuff, and.
We, and Mr. Warrenfels recognizes that urgency. So we are working towards having a program that's a little bit, faster is not the right term necessarily, but a little bit more proactive, I guess, than in the past. And you're absolutely correct with the trees. I mean, if you'll recall, at the last workshop we talked about, there's a street that we're making a sidewalk repair to, and we're probably gonna have to build a boardwalk because we're trying to avoid the 3 trees that are in a stand right by that sidewalk. So that's the kind of things we do here. Other communities would just tear those trees down. That'd be their first reaction to it.
Okay. Brian, our monitors have switched up here to something. We're not seeing what you're seeing on our monitors. Okay. All right.
Okay. All right, so the building fund, as I mentioned at the introduction today, there is still a general fund contribution of $307,328 to the building fund. We are proposing fee changes. We're trying to get that work done, have the study completed, and get you fee changes at some point during the FY26 year. So those fee change rates have not been calculated in this budget, so whatever they end up being will actually hopefully reduce this number, this contribution number. My understanding is that we've not changed our fees in many, many years, perhaps even 2 decades. So that'll probably be a dramatic change. Now, it'd be more dramatic if we, had a lot more development going on also. But it'll help make this number smaller. Next item is the Tax Increment Finance District, or CRA. Our total CRA revenue for FY26 is projected to be $2,092,800. That includes the city's general fund contribution of $910,615. So the city contributes, the county contributes, and the Tampa Port Authority are the 3 entities that provide funding for our CRA. In terms of expenditures, we have $3,000 for the CRA audit. We have a capital outlay of $400,000. This is to an additional investment in the Riverside Park project. Now, I've been talking about Riverside Park and the budget. We had asked HAF to give us early budget numbers, and they did. And I mentioned Mr. Langfield and I were going through those numbers, trying to come up with a more reasonable approach. And they've recently, in the last couple of weeks, talked to Mr. Langfield again and said, if you give them until the end of July, they'll be at a design point there where the numbers will be much more refined. Because right now there's a large contingency they built into their initial numbers because they were too early in their process because we had requested it. So now they've asked for that extra time. I'm okay with that. I still propose putting this $400,000 here because I can't imagine that the number will still be $3.4 million. It's going to be more than that. I just don't know the magnitude of what that will end up being at this point. So I'm comfortable if the council will accept investing an additional $400,000 in 26.
That money's just a set aside. It's not going anywhere.
Right. It won't go anywhere unless we actually, the council says, yeah, go ahead and move forward with this. Debt service out of that budget. So debt service is $907,138 in debt service. And then the ending balance in the CRA fund at the end of September 26 will be $782,662.
Vice Mayor?
Question?
Kravitz? Okay, thank you.
Now, we had we were very fortunate to have the legislature support and approve funding of our legislative request for hurricane-resistant funding projects, I should say. Unfortunately, the governor vetoed that city's award. We had put in the sandbag machine in fiscal 26's budget already at using unassigned fund balance for $60,000. We had the 2 fuel trailers in the fleet fund at $70,000, and we had 1 Starlink component in the CIT at $14,000. So right now, those are still in there and will remain in there unless council wants us to do something different.
Critical. So, Mr. B, the sandbag machine, is there any opportunity to purchase that now? And then even if we pay for it out of 26, and I don't know how that would work, but there's an offset to this. So we spend $60,000 to buy a sandbag machine, and I can't quantify the overtime hours that we spend filling sandbags, but there's a huge offset to now I know at the end of the day, sometime in the future, FEMA might pay us back for some of that. Or they might not, because a lot of times we fill sandbags in anticipation of, so, you know, they're not always recovering all of our expenses for the sandbags. So I really hate to wait another hurricane season to get this machine. In fact, I would have, if we'd had in a perfect world, we would have ordered this machine the day after we found out we were vetoed. So I don't know if there's any.
Sure, there's a way we can do it. Jim, do you want to talk to the mayor's question?
Yes, we could actually do a budget amendment in this year to use unassigned fund balance. It would be the same as doing it next year. We just do it earlier. And yeah, that would work. We could do that.
Just personally, I mean, I don't know how the others feel, but we can't do all of it. But the sandbag thing, I mean, rarely do we go through a hurricane season where we don't have at least one sandbag event. Now, the fuel trailers, that's not an every season thing, but the sandbag thing is almost, I mean, I'll be shocked if we make it through a hurricane season and we don't have one. So, Councilmember.
Well, technically, you could fund everything, provided you have the cash in unassigned fund balance. You could fund all of those items in fiscal year 2025, and then they just wouldn't appear in fiscal year 2026 because they're technically not coming out of fiscal year 2026 revenue. They're coming out of the fund balance that we've already accumulated. So we could do a budget amendment for fiscal year 2025, purchase what needs to be purchased going into the hurricane season that we're starting, and then they just wouldn't appear at all in the fiscal year 2026 budget as uses of unassigned fund balance.
Yeah, I just don't know if they would recommend spending that much money
Right.
on unassigned fund balance.
But technically, we can.
Well, we could.
It's just
I just don't know if that, I would have to, but we could. I just don't know if we want to spend $800,000 or almost 900 is what the request was.
Right.
So I mean, yeah, we could.
Yeah.
Councilmember Chambers.
I agree with Councilmember Fernandez. Certainly with the maybe one fuel trailer or some contingency for us to have pre-rented ones or something. I don't want us to be caught like we were last year. And also with the sandbag machine, we could certainly do that now. I mean, the fund balance, I don't know what your unassigned fund balance is now. I don't remember. But I don't ever remember a year where the fund balance is less after the end of the budget season than before. We always accumulate a little bit more during the year because we don't always pay salaries and, people leave and there's the gaps. So I think that money will be there. But I don't know all the numbers either, Mayor.
I agree, given the fact that we only budgeted 95% of our revenues coming in, at least through the general fund, through our ad valorem and so forth, and we never spend 100% of what we actually budget. There's enough of a surplus that would be able to, I think, cover at least those two items: the sandbag machine and the fuel trailers. I think those are critical. I think that we got very lucky, dodged a bullet, and I know I've bagged sandbags before, and it's killer. So I would agree we should do this as soon as get that done this year and get it out of the mix altogether. We don't have to worry about it. It's done.
Councilmember Kravitz.
Yeah, fully in favor of anything we can do for hurricane preparedness, absolutely.
The only thing I would say is just they're doing a terrific job, but we're also taking some of that slack out of the system that we're used to being there. They're getting a lot more surgical with the budget. So
Yes.
we've always we we'll budget $100,000, but we know we're only gonna spend 70,000 of it every year, but we still budget. A lot of that slack is being taken out of the budget process, so I think, anyway, I guess we're looking for some recommendations of,
So what we can do, what I'm hearing, is yes on the sandbag machine using FY25 unassigned fund balance. Fuel trailers as well. Yes, you want the fuel?
I mean, me
trailers?
personally, if the current unassigned fund balance for fiscal year 2025 can handle the purchase in 2025, then I'm in favor of being as prepared as we can and still fiscally responsible.
So Jim, the fuel trailers are in fleet. Could we accommodate that through the unassigned instead, and then we'd make the adjustments to the fleet fund?
Yes, we could. The, just to speak on, I think it was Mayor Ross's point, Jamie was pointing out we spent, what was it, 21,000 in overtime? In total wages for sandbag, just the sandbagging last year. So I think if we could get that ASAP, and you're correct, we have the funds, we could do it now. It would just be doing it now rather than later. We do a budget amendment. Same with the utility trailers. They're programmed into the 26 proposed budget out of the fleet fund. We'll have to look at the numbers there. I think it's a total of 60,000. 70,000, I'm sorry. So it's not a huge number. I think we can make that work.
Okay. Thank you, Jim. So that's what, council's okay, that's what we'll
if
propose.
we can make it work, I mean, I'm in favor of it. It sounds like everybody's in favor of it.
As long as it works. As long as it works.
Okay, so if we make that work, just one thing, the fleet fund numbers will look different when you get the actual budget in August from what you may have seen today, because right now the trailers are in the fleet fund, so when that comes out, you might see it.
But we'll get them cheaper now than we will next year too. I mean, there's a time value to your also.
Yeah, buying anything when the storm's upon us is
Right.
not good.
Well,
Okay.
that's also assuming you can get everything before hurricane season ends.
Well, that is assuming.
So right now, we checked on the sandbag machine at least, and there's a 7 to 10 day lead time from one of the vendors, so that's not too bad.
Until a storm forms
I know,
in the
until a storm
Atlantic,
forms,
so
yeah.
we need to get on this pretty quick.
3 years.
I do have one comment about the $20,000 in wages and the sandbag machine is $60,000. I would anticipate that we would have the sandbag machine more than 1 year.
Correct.
Therefore, if you factor in $20,000, you've now covered, for doing this, the required activity, you've covered the cost of the sandbag machine versus labor, so
Oh, yeah.
it's
And
it's an offset.
There may be multiple storms in a given year, so.
Correct.
Yeah, you'll get that money back.
Yeah, and now, it still takes labor for this process.
Yes, but
Somebody's
it's
gotta run the
less.
machine, and then we've got to take the sandbags out to the distribution, and we've got to distribute them to, I mean, so there's still gonna be some, but it'll be a fraction of what it costs to have those crews out there, 12 hours a day, just shoveling. I mean, you've seen it. I mean, some of us have done it.
It'll be a quick payback.
Yeah,
And not only that, but those crews, when they're doing the sandbag machine, they're not doing other work.
right.
So that's part of it too. Okay, and we'll leave the Starlink in the 26 budget. That is not as critical in our minds, so if you're okay with that?
Yes.
Okay.
CIT anyway.
Okay, next steps. So, like we said at the beginning, this might be the last council workshop, hopefully. If you feel you're pretty confident where we are with everything we've discussed, it could be. If you felt like you needed another one, July 15th would have been tentatively scheduled as the optional council budget workshop. That evening, later on that day and that evening, in city council meeting, we're going to be setting the millage rate, hopefully, if the council, again, is comfortable with that. July 17th was set aside as the special meeting to set the millage rate if you didn't want to do it on the 15th. But to do that, you'd have to take a vote at the 15th regular meeting to schedule the 17th. And then by August 15th, you'll be delivered the finalized proposed budget, and then it'll be posted on the city's website. And then in September, we'll have the millage and budget ordinances and hearings. And just as a reminder, what we're talking about. This video will be put on today. Typically, it's just within hours of this event, so the public can watch the same thing that we're going through today.
Council, everybody okay with this schedule?
One question.
Councilmember
So
King?
when you say setting the millage rate on July 15th or the 17th special meeting, that's the tentative millage rate, correct?
Yes.
Not the real millage rate, that's later on. Okay, thank you.
It's basically not to exceed millage rate.
The
Yes.
Not to exceed.
Yeah, I just,
But you need that for trim notices.
Correct.
yep.
Brian, can you put the schedule back up so everybody can, does that work for everybody? Is
A
that,
reminder, I'm not here on either the 15th or the 17th, so.
I'm not here on the 17th.
I'm not here on the 17th, probably.
okay, so we would want to shoot then for the 15th to set the millage rate.
Yes.
Okay. And are you comfortable with, this is the last budget workshop?
Yes.
I am.
Councilmember Kravitz?
Got 2 or 3 desiderata here that I could address about the budget, and since we're moving into scheduling, it sounds like we're in the process of wrapping up. I was wondering if I could bring up those points now.
Okay, you can take this slide down, Brian, and we'll put it back up at the end.
It'll just be a minute.
Yep, go ahead.
First point was about the Tampa Bay Falcons. They were here last council meeting, little football team, and I think we found out from them that they're paying about $5,000 for the field that they use. I was wondering if we could add something in there under line 82, aid to private organizations, currently budgeted with $40,000. Would that be an item where we have to subsidize them to pay us $5,000, or would it be sufficient to just offer them the field for free, or what would be the process for helping them?
So I have not had this conversation yet with Mr. Langfeld about that issue. That's something we're going to report back to you.
Okay.
I can tell you just from experience, I'm sure Mr. Langfeld can tell you from experience, dealing with the different organizations that use fields is very, very delicate. It's something you really want to think about, so I'm not prepared to answer that right now.
Oh, okay.
Councilmember Chambers would agree with the difficulty issue.
Yeah.
Ah.
If he were here.
One more item then. I was looking at the CIT funding that's being used for fire department bunker gear, $81,200, and I was curious if this is going to be the non-PFAS gear that's going to become legally required.
So so Chief Murley spoke at the last meeting, so that's what they're looking at. They're still trying to work through with the vendor, the non-PFAS gear has not proven itself yet so far to be as sturdy and resilient as the typical gear had been in the past, so they're working with the vendor to see about getting to a point where that gear now will meet the standards that they expect. But that is the goal. The goal that Chief Kemp's expressed to me is the goal would be to start buying the non-PFAS gear to be in compliance with the state law.
Got it, okay. I was looking at the legal department budget, and I saw that there is $23,000 proposed for outside legal services, I believe 31 professional services, or is there a different line for our money that we spend on outside counsel?
No, that's probably correct, yeah.
It just seems surprisingly low to me, that's all. Okay, thank you for the clarification. And then one more item here about the pipelining. I looked at the Public Works budget of $200,000 for pipelining, and I was curious if 200,000 is sufficient. I mean, I remember we were discussing a much more extensive pipelining effort, so.
So right now, we've had 200,000 for the sanitary lining in the past, and that's still in there as well. We have $200,000 for stormwater lining, which we've not done in the past. So that would be a new item. With any new item, and Mr. Warrenfeld's particularly I'm sure he's the same page as I am. Until we really get a handle on how much it's truly going to cost, we felt like let's go in with a reasonable number, and if we find that we need to do a whole larger section, we'll come back to the council at that point and address that issue.
Okay, so
And as far as could I address the outside legal services number
Sure,
too?
of course, yeah.
So we did increase the outside legal services number this year in the budget, and it may not. Again, I appreciate what you're saying, and if we find it would, under Mr. Mueller's leadership over the next year that this is something that perhaps we could add more dollars to in the future, and it'd be a wise use of those funds, then we'd bring that to you as well next fiscal year.
Okay, great. Thank you for the clarification. Then my final one here relates to the general obligation bond line item of $10,000 for public education. Just as a clarification, it says Department Police, but my understanding was in discussions that we've had that there's an option at least for also including a fire department element to that new building. So I was wondering if it should be qualified as fire plus police.
We just put it in as police just to have a home for it. but it's, yes, we've never hidden the fact that we're looking at a third fire station potential on that site. And as I've mentioned, the analysis can't just be about the capital side, the construction side. It's going to have to be about the operating costs going forward, and whether that station needs to be online with its full operating complement of staff day one, or whether we can still hold off based on the responses. That's analysis that we still have not yet done.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we weren't precluding that by categorizing.
No, we're not precluding. And I've had conversations with members of the fire department over this issue, and I've told them the same thing I just told you.
Great. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, council, we're good with the tentative schedule? Okay, we're good with that. Everybody good? All right.
So this is the last workshop then, so
Yes.
okay, and then July 15th, regular council meeting, we'll have the tentative millage, not to exceed millage. Okay.
Yes, and we really ought to shoot for that because there's people that can't be here on the 17th, so,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Next Tuesday.
Yeah, we want a full house for that one.
Lish.
Okay, anything else, Mr. Bayou?
Anything else?
Directors, finance, anything? Okay, thank you very much, very well done. Much smoother than, this has been a great process. You guys are doing a fantastic job, and thank you all for all your hard work on this. Thank you, Mr. Bayou. We'll stand adjourned.
Good job, guys.